communication professional, marketing communication professional with over 25 years of experience helping organizations communicate their values to stakeholders. She has worked with local governments, private nonprofits, universities, and small businesses. For the past 7 years, she has been the communications manager for the Orange County Public Library in Hillsborough, North Carolina. And I understand that as of last Friday, that is no longer her position. So she will talk a little bit more about that probably here. And just to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Libbie. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all this morning. And I want to thank Sam Suber, I think that's how I pronounce his last name, for reaching out to me last January to invite me to participate today. One of the things that he talked about was that you all might be interested in hearing about focus groups. And so we'll get into that. But I thought there might be a couple of other tools that you all would be interested in finding out a little bit more about. So this is how it'll run. We'll go through the presentation fairly quickly, and then we'll open it up for conversation. There's no way that I can dive deep really into any one of these with just an hour. That's okay. But I wanted to hit some highlights. So, and anytime you have questions, just put them in the chat. And unless it's just really burning, we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. So marketing your community college library is the title of my presentation. And let's see how we get to, I'm on my Mac, and this is not what I'm used to working with. It's supposed to, hold on one second. We got me on screen share. Let's see, hold on 1 minute. I'm going to go back. I'll go through the introduction. That's me. I'm Libbie Hough, and as of Friday, my last day at the Orange County Public Library in Hillsborough, North Carolina, I am leaving that position and moving over into the county housing department, where they need some communications work, but they also need some program management. I stopped sharing for just a minute, so we can go back to that in a second. Prior to that, I owned my own marketing communications business, Communication Matters. And it was with that endeavor for about 14 years that I worked with private nonprofits, higher education entities, small businesses, and a variety of other enterprises in our community. And prior to that, I did a little bit of development work. And then prior to that, I was a social worker, and I ran a 24-hour crisis intervention hotline. So working at the library has been a really nice mix of my interest with social work, my training as a social worker, and my experience as a communications professional. So we're going to try this screen share again. And here we go. And let's see if it will, there we go. And I just told you all about that, and that's me. And as I was trying to think of how to pull this together, I thought, we all as communications professionals or either librarians who are charged with managing the communications for our library, we're dreaming of clear and consistent, compelling content. What's going to drive people to the library? What's going to drive people to use our collections, access our services, and just know that we're there? Sometimes it's even just a general awareness. And then we also want to make sure that we're looking professional. And a lot of that is supported by unified look and feel to your materials. So today we'll talk about 3 different marketing tools that I think help to simplify and help to refine your marketing efforts. Granted, there's a bit of time getting these tools pulled together, but once you do, you really are able to move through things, move through your efforts in a much more refined, streamlined approach. So we're going to talk today about social media teams, style guides, and focus groups. Social media teams. The reason I started a social media team at the Orange County Public Library was I was being consumed with being on social media all day. And I was a shop of one, and I couldn't afford to spend all my time on social media and then also manage the website, do the e-newsletters. And at that point, my job also involved a lot of community engagement work. And so there was really no way to manage all that. Plus, when you're a shop of one, it can get pretty lonely. And so I wanted to pull on the talents and the energy and the creativity of those around me. And I'm not a librarian by trade. I'm a social worker and a communications professional. So I also wanted to pull in people who were experts in their field, librarians. So I looked for people who were enthusiastic, who were knowledgeable, not necessarily about social media, although that helps, but really they are subject matter experts. They're flexible individuals. And the reason for that is something may come up one day and you need to shift your plans. And so you need somebody who's a flexible thinker, who is honestly not going to freak out if you ask them to change directions at the drop of a hat. Reliable, you're going to set up a content calendar. And so you need to know that the people that, or the individual who's helping you, you can count on them to do what they say they're going to do. Eager to learn. What I found is that by pulling in librarians, they were subject matter experts in what they did, managing collections, developing wonderful programs, but they weren't necessarily marketing communication professionals. And so it was an opportunity for them to learn about my skill set. And folks who are creative, and that can come in a variety of forms, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But those are the attributes that I would look for if you're developing a social media team. The team can be you and one other person. It doesn't have to be a huge group of people. The team that I developed, it was me and 2 other librarians. So you'll want to spend some time talking about content. What is it that you're going to create? What is it that you're going to share? What do you want folks to be aware of? Is it services primarily? Is it research? Is it textbooks that are available online that folks might not know about? And so you're wanting them to be able to, you want to help them save money. So what is it that you want to share about your library services, collections, and programs? That will outline the creation of the content that you are developing. You'll also want to create some guidelines. If it's you and a couple of other people, then, or even just one other person, you want to be the one saying, this is the kind of content that we'll put out. This is the kind of voice that we'll use. And here's an example. We want to let our students know that we're a welcoming, helpful library environment. And if that's the case, then you need to spell that out in your guidelines so that the content that you and anyone else that you pull in, that you're following those guidelines. Brief example, there are lots of other examples that I could use. And here's an example of a posting calendar. You will need this. And this will be something that I will share with you after the presentation. So you would create your content calendar, your posting calendar based on the platform that you use, the individual responsible, the content that that person is responsible for sharing out, and what is your goal? Sometimes it might be merely awareness, and that's okay, because if people aren't aware of your library, then they're not going to use your library. So, for example, for us, Instagram was a library photo album, and that was mainly to drive awareness of our library to the greater community. With Facebook, we wanted to profile our programs, and we wanted to drive attendance. We also wanted to drive partner support and our awareness of attention to DEI as it relates to the county library. And then the posting frequency. Again, this can change. This is just to get folks started. I would encourage you to revisit this every 6 months. Is it working? Are we getting some engagement? And that can be something as simple as likes. Really great if it's shares. But if it's okay if you're just driving awareness. The next tool we'll talk about are style guides. And this is really helpful in developing a consistent and unified look and feel to your materials. So you probably are using your community college logo. That you could talk with the marketing lead there, if there is a marketing lead, or someone who has management over the logos. Hopefully they have the college color palette outlined for you and the designated fonts. But when you have consistent use of your logos, a consistent use of color, and a consistent use of font, then what you're doing is creating a consistent experience for your user. They're not wondering, who is this coming from? What is this about? You're helping to create that consistent user experience. And here's an example of how you can develop a branding kit or a style guide kit. The style guide that I created is actually 10 pages long. Very few people are going to want to look through that. If you're sharing, for example, assets, logo, colors, fonts with someone on your social media team, this is the basic information that they're going to need to have. What are the logo variations that are allowable? What's the color palette? What's some information about the library? Up here, we have the brand statement for the Orange County Public Library. The Orange County Public Library is a fine-free library which welcomes everyone to use its diverse programs, collections, and services. So those are that's the overarching message that we want to use for the library. And over in the far right, down towards the bottom, we have some focus keywords. So those are the kinds of hints that you can share with a social media team, and or as you're developing a new material, like, right, we want to make sure that folks know we're friendly, we're welcoming. In the public library realm, because taxpayer dollars make our existence possible, we use the word yours a lot, that it's your library. It's not our library, it's yours, it's the public's library. And then the other words that you may choose that help define who you are. Focus groups. This is probably, I'd say, the most multi-layered element of things that we're going to talk about today. That's because you're pulling in other individuals, groups of 6 to 10 people, either internal groups. By that, I mean, it could be faculty within your community college. It could be students. If it's external, it could be school systems that feed into your community colleges. It could be employers if your focus is workforce development to support economic development within your community. So when I think about focus groups, I'm thinking about who am I wanting to work with? What am I going to get input on? When are we going to meet? Where are we going to meet? And then how will I incorporate their feedback into my marketing efforts? So I put some examples here. If it's students, faculty, administration, school system, employers, how can the library support their interests? Because that's what you're wanting to focus on, is the end user, the customer that you're trying to serve. How can the library support research, workforce development? Maybe it's recruitment. So in that regard, you might be working with admissions administration or administrative professionals from your admissions department. The when, what is the best time for the participants that you're wanting to work with? And that's really critical. Students may have more free time in the evenings. Administration, it might be 8 o'clock in the morning, 9:30, whatever, a breakfast thing before they get the rest of their day started. School systems, employers, and you will need to develop some relationships with those individuals to find out when is the best time for you to pick their brains, more or less. And where are they? Are they there on your campus? That's great if they're there, but it may be that they're out in the community. If it's working with employers, you may find that a good time or a good place would be to interact with them at a chamber event. It may be that you develop a program where you're inviting employers, career and tech folks from your school systems, and pulling them together at a time that would be great for them. For those individuals, I have found that a lot of times it's very, very early, but a breakfast meeting is what works really well. Second would be a lunch meeting where perhaps you're able to provide a box lunch for them. And this is something that this last piece, how will you incorporate their feedback? I think that's really vital to let them know that you're not just soliciting input just for the sake of soliciting input and to say that you did, but that you actually are going to use their feedback and to let them know how you envision doing that. It might change, but at this point in time, this is how I envision using your feedback to talk about our library services. And then how are you going to report back to them about your success? I think that's also very critical. Oftentimes we gain input from somebody, but we don't necessarily think that they care about how that has gone for us. But I think when you do circle back around to an individual to say, look, I used your information in some materials that we developed around this service, and we had a 10% increase in use. That shows them, one, that you followed through on using their input, which means you valued their time and their expertise, and that you care enough to circle back around to them to let, again, emphasizing that they have value in your success. And that builds stronger relationships, builds greater community engagement, and fosters the ability to have partnerships when you might need to go back to them and say, last time we had some real success, I'd like to follow up again and see if we can build on that. And vice versa. They will see you as a dedicated professional, and perhaps reach out to you when they need assistance. Perhaps if they're an employer and they need somebody to help their employees with some career development resources, your library might be a great resource for them. And so you've positioned yourself as a strong partner. So when I think of incentives, and a lot of folks think of incentives, you think about things. So how can I get folks to participate in a focus group? Well, the things matter. The gas cards might help, the college t-shirts, the food, but also you can think about intangibles, recognition in a community college publication, a newsletter, thanking these businesses in participating. If it's an internal newsletter, thanking these faculty members or students in participating in your efforts to better serve the larger community. Clear communication is a huge incentive. If you send out an invitation and it's like to participate in a focus group, but it's lacking time, it's lacking details on how to get to the place where you're meeting, that's a disincentive. Same as time of day, that's an incentive. Childcare may be an important incentive, especially for adult students who are attending your classes. Translators, if you have multiple languages spoken in your community. So I encourage you to think beyond the things, although the things help, but it's a total package as far as incentives to get folks to participate in a focus group. So, like I said, that was going to be really, really quick. I wanted to just touch on some highlights, share with you some resources that I've enjoyed using over time, and then and open it up to questions. The resources, Pixabay, you can get great free photos there. I use Canva. I use Canva as to do this presentation, and I got all of the images from Canva. As a community college library, you may qualify for a nonprofit account with Canva, which means it's free. And then you have access to thousands and thousands of templates, which is what this is that I adjusted for something that I wanted to present to you all, and thousands of really nice stock images. Reverso, I'm not going in any order here. Reverso is great for doing some quick translations into the languages that may be spoken into your community. Sendinblue, I'm mentioning because it's a great email service provider. It's very inexpensive for what you get, and I've much less expensive than something like Constant Contact or iContact, MailChimp. And so I really, really enjoy that. Grammarly is a wonderful tool just to double check and make sure that your communications are clear, there are no typos. And again, as much as I can, I have used free versions of all of these. QR Code Monkey, that's something at the library, we just started using QR codes. That is a free QR code generator. Interesting to use, helpful to use. You can brand that with your logo, again, for free. Use your librarians, use your administrative staff people, use the staff around you. They're great free resources. I've mentioned NC Live because that's the consortium that is present in North Carolina, but you also have library consortia wherever you are, and they often offer free workshops. Even if you get just one nugget of information, I consider that a real success, worth my hour. Facebook groups, if you can find other individuals, other Facebook groups that have to do with library marketing, those are really helpful. And then I'll stop there, and I'll stop sharing my screen at the moment, and we can open it up for conversation. that was a lot in a very short period of time, and I realized that. But I just wanted to hit the highlights.
Libby, there is somebody who put in the chat. It's not a question, but they said their library had a marketing team of about 6 people who
Oh
meet
my
on
gosh.
Teams. And I'm looking at that going, wow, that would be our entire library staff
Oh,
practically.
wow.
So yeah, but
You're very lucky. That's great.
yeah. I have a question for you regarding the social media, because that's where I'm really interested in. How do you keep track of what social media to go for next? I noticed on, for example, your thing on your calendar that you didn't have like TikTok, for example. And I'm like, are you thinking of, were you thinking of doing TikTok? And how do you know exactly, when do you jump on board with another social media? How do you know when to go about that? Do you have any suggestions or anything like
Sure.
that?
Yeah. The best advice I can give for social media is if don't start anything you can't finish, and don't start anything you can't nurture. When I first started at the library, we had a very meager following on Facebook and Twitter, and I stayed there for 2 to 3 years, working on building the audience there, and doing so by inviting everybody I knew in the community. It was just very basic, starting there, following tweets of relevant organizations. When we had opportunities to do shout outs to community partners, doing that both on Twitter and Facebook, and tagging them, just letting people know we were there. And so I believe when I started about 7 years ago, we had maybe 600 followers, 500 followers on Facebook. And when I left, it was approaching 4,000. What we ended up doing when I invited others to come in, that's when I thought, okay, we can expand our presence. And one of the individuals who wanted to come in, really hot and heavy lover of Instagram, which personally I'm not. And so I let her run with it. And within a year, we had 1,000 followers on Instagram. And so TikTok, no, didn't even consider that. That is a completely different beast, fun, and definitely worth doing. But I was the only person at the library whose full-time job was communications. And then the other 2 individuals who were helping me with social media, librarians, but they're hourly, and they had their first priority was desk service and supporting those efforts and the divisions that they were in. So I was already borrowing them. They were not dedicated to my efforts. They were dedicated in their hearts, but I couldn't dedicate too many hours. I couldn't get them to do that. During the pandemic, we did branch out to YouTube because we were doing some online programming. We had mixed results with folks just even wanting to participate with that. And then within the last year, the library was able to purchase an interface called Digital Learn. I believe that's an effort from PLA, Public Libraries of America. And so what was going to start happening was any sort of instructional videos that we had started putting on YouTube, those will be able to do in this Digital Learn platform. So the question then became, so what will we do with YouTube? Because if you can't keep it fresh, there's really no reason to have it. So I would just say it all depends on your bandwidth.
I have one, unless somebody else has another question, I do have one more question. With the focus groups, you talk about incentives, but do you do targeted, like, I think we should have this student or this administrator, or is it more of, do you do more of like an open call and say, we'd like to have people be part of our focus group?
I think it can be both. Hopefully you, as a community college librarian, you have existing connections with particular faculty members and or students. And what I find is that if you're have a developing or a good relationship, then you can engage them in conversation. And I'd really like to explore having a focus group here around this. Can you help me brainstorm around that? Who else would be good? What do you think about doing an open call? I think open calls are fine. If you do an open call, then you have to be even more specific about what it is, the questions you're going to be asking. And that doesn't mean you have to publish the questions ahead of time, but example, my goal for this focus group would be to find out how I can do X, Y, and Z. And if you're interested in providing input around that, if you've had some thoughts around that, then you're helping them to self-select in as well as self-select out. I mean, not everybody's going to care about everything. So I think it can be a blend.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or discussion on this topic?
Yes, I do. Sue from Moraine Valley Community College Library. Libbie, very good webinar, very good. I work with Sam Suber, and he told me about this webinar because we're part of the marketing team at the college. So our marketing team maybe has 6 people, but they're appointed because I don't think anyone would volunteer to do this in our college. They just wouldn't. I would, but no one else would. So we have circulation people, we have tech services people, and librarians. We have a variety so that each area can be represented with our social media posts. We have one librarian that does all our social media posting, and she's very good at it. She's very good at it. And I think she has a calendar, like you mentioned, because you have to in order to kind of lay out what your what it's going to be like, you know, whatever you want to promote. So we do have that. I do use Canva, and I talked our dean into purchasing the Pro.
Yes.
And she did. And we couldn't get it for free. We tried, but that's impossible. But also, because we have that Pro, you can do QR codes if you have that Pro version. And I asked our marketing department for their branding kit, and I incorporated that into my Canva so that everyone that uses that can use the fonts and the colors that go with it.
Perfect. Yes.
Which
I
is
was able to
nice.
set up, and I had a screenshot of the branding kit in Canva. And while it's very helpful and convenient, it's not the prettiest thing in the world to share on a screen. And but yes, all of the things that you saw on that PDF are in the Canva kit. One of the things that I ran into with our QR code generation was I was not going to be the only one creating the QR codes. And so I needed to create a process that they were all in one place so that the 7 or 8 programmers or individuals within the library knew where to go and get them. And I found that Canva's QR code generator and filing system just didn't allow me that level that I wanted, or otherwise I would have used the QR code generator in Canva, especially if I was about the only one generating the QR codes.
Yeah, usually it's me or the other librarian that does the social medias. We also have a Teams channel, a marketing committee channel on Teams too, so that we can kind of coordinate ideas. But I would like to incorporate our students into a marketing, but it's so hard with their schedules to get them because they really know what our students want.
Yeah.
And I don't know that.
When I think about students that might be as motivated as possible, because I know with community college, I mean, you do have a lot of college age students, but you've got students who are up into, 70s, right? And so one, not all of them are going to be digital natives. Many of us, digital immigrants. But I would think entrepreneurship, students who are studying entrepreneurship, marketing, business, maybe nonprofit management. Those would be the people, the kids, the students, adults who would have the most motivation, because they could then use it on their resume as an internship. The other piece, and when I had my own business, I paid my interns. I did not want to take advantage of students. And I wanted to be able to also have a little bit more recourse and ability to supervise. And so if there's it depends on the environment, the funding environment for your community college, of course. But if there is an opportunity to pay or course credit for participating, then that might yield some participation. The challenge with students, it's just like with having volunteers, is the turnover can be great, and your work is not their first priority. Their studies are their first priority, and it's a sort of a double-edged sword. So you may want to think about some very maybe them as a focus group, and mine them for their information, and then broadcast to the rest of the universe, the college, look at these individuals who helped with whatever. And if they're all coming, or the majority of them are coming from one discipline, then maybe there's an opportunity to work that in with future class requirements.
We recently worked with our graphic design instructor.
Yeah.
And she had 5 students that we asked them to create our new library logo on bags that we give away.
Yeah.
So we asked them to create a logo for bags, for pencils, and for Post-it notes.
Perfect.
We had 5 students that gave us all their portfolios of what work they did.
Right.
We picked one, we narrowed it down to one, and then we worked with that student to narrow down what posters we liked, how to tweak it, how to edit it. And then at the end, we do now, our giveaways are the bag with the logo on it, the Post-it notes, and when it was really successful. And then when we recently hit our Fall Fest for all the students to come see the groups. We gave out the Post-it notes and the bags, and telling the students this was done by a graphic art design student.
That's the most beautiful scenario I can think of. The other thing, when I think about situations like that and the funding, I know Durham Tech, which is in Durham and Orange counties here in North Carolina, they've been trying to beef up their foundation. And I don't know if, somehow working with folks within the foundation, or, some sort of that development arm from a marketing standpoint, and the library having a voice at that table, that may be a source of funding, because I know, depending on how large or small your outfit is, funding is a huge, huge issue. There may be, and again, this would also depend on the constraints or processes and procedures that you have outlined at your community college, but there may be some opportunities for businesses to provide sponsorships. And so you co-brand something with your library for a particular event, that sort of thing. We had some success with that.
Thank you. Those are good ideas.
Libby, Brent posted in the chat that library student workers may be a good source of focus group members.
Absolutely.
So, yes, I had that same thought myself. So, yeah.
And alumni, from the community college itself. Did you use the library? Why not? It's as important to know why people, I didn't even know it existed, or the hours were outside of when I was, so just finding out about the usability and accessibility of your library from folks who've been there. And I would say, captive audience is always the best audience as far as, getting information. I think also, hopefully your community college has a strategic plan, and then from that funnels down a strategic communications plan. And then from there, then the marketing communications plan for the library can gather a lot of strength, a lot of momentum, and a lot of the work is already done. If the community college's primary focus for the next 3 to 5 years is workforce development, and that so strategic marketing for the college is going to focus around that, hopefully, if that's the flow, then the library could piggyback on that. And again, especially if your staffing is really small, the more that you can find out what other people are within your organization are doing, and sharing those ideas, sharing the tools that are already available. There may be, I know when I started at the county, and I still will be with the county, there is a group of county communicators, communications folks for the different county departments, and none of us knew what the tools that the other folks had. And so it really became helpful to create an inventory of what was already available. And then with cybersecurity concerns, it's also really important to work with your IT department, and making sure that if I download this app, is that compliant with what IT wants us to do? And it always helps to find out. In my case, I found, if the county level communications office already had an in with it, already was using a particular app like QR Code Monkey, then all I had to do with our internal, with the library IT person, would say, well, the county's already using this, so it's okay for me to use this, which gave me a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
I'm curious as to what your biggest challenges are. Time.
Consistency. Getting the idea of setting up a calendar to me is just like, well, why haven't we done that? Yeah. So that's a lot of it right there for me.
If you go online, HubSpot, they'll give you examples of calendars. And honestly, I found those because they tend to navigate or interact with much larger organizations than I was in charge of working with. I found them a little overwhelming. And so really what I did was I set up a calendar that made sense to my brain. Just super simple table in Word.
Mm-hmm.
And I think giving yourself the permission to say, this is what we're trying now,
Mm-hmm.
And then evaluate that effectiveness. And
Right.
I was using Hootsuite, and I was able to get the analytics from there very quickly for all 3 of the channels. And that was very helpful. That's one of the reasons I went over to Sendinblue for email service provider. Wonderful analytics. absolutely wonderful analytics. The county was using a website vendor that had a module, has a module for e-blasts, no analytics. I could put hyperlinks in a newsletter. I couldn't tell what people were opening. So I couldn't tell what people were interested in finding out more about. Likewise, I wasn't finding out what people had no interest in. And so, that's the constant conversation you want to be having with people you communicate with. What do you want? I want to give you more of that. What don't you care about? Then let's not waste anybody's time.
Okay, I have two other comments then. This is Amy again.
Sure.
One ties kind of to that, because I'm kind of curious about the use of the QR codes and things like that, because QR codes were huge back in like the beginning of 2010 or whatever, and they kind of just seemed to die. And then the pandemic came along and everybody went, oh, well, we need to get a way to get menus to people, so send them a QR code and things like that. Is there a way to get analytics for people if they use a QR code or things like that?
Yes.
How do you track that?
It's a really good question. And before I set up our process at the library to use QR codes, not only to communicators within county government, but to every communicator within the county that I knew, I was asking that very same thing. Because I'm a huge believer in being able, as much as possible, to track efficacy. So QR codes were around in 2010. I hated them because personally, I think they're ugly. And I didn't ever want to include them in any design work I was overseeing. Plus, you had to have an app. Now, smartphones, you don't have to have an app. Your camera can do it. So it's much more user friendly, accessible, which was huge for me. QR code monkey, you can, it's free. The challenge is with QR codes, if you want analytics, you're going to have to upgrade to a paid plan. So one way that you could get around that is if you're asking individuals, how did they find out about you? You could include that QR code as one of the checks. That would be a way around it.
Okay. The other question is thought I had was, you mentioned about the challenges, and I say a lot of that is, like you said, time, but it's not just time for us. I mean, asking faculty members who seemed swamped to begin with to be part of a focus group, they're like, I don't have time for one other thing on my plate. And it's the same way with the students too.
Sure.
A lot of our students are like, we've got so many other things going. So that's
the thought
I had.
Yeah. Their parents, they may be older. They're depending on your community, huge transportation issues. And so taking a step out of that, those very important things to make sure they're being able to get their education, that is a huge ask. So I wouldn't have focus groups very often in your situation. And then think about the incentives that would make it as easy as possible. And then that's to me also why you report back and say your time was valuable. And this is how I used your input. And this is the result that I experienced. So yeah, you're asking few and far between, you're keeping it short, you're keeping it simple. And for, say, college students, gas cards. If it's businesses, they're going to probably have a little bit more time, unless they're a sole proprietor, and then that would be tough. But your major employers are probably going to be your best bets for involvement there. And that's another reason to have lots of be involved with your chamber. if you can be, if workforce development, for example, is a priority for your community, which it is for most communities these days, be involved with your chamber, get to know those folks so that when you have an ask like that, it's not a cold call. It's, oh, I know Amy and she's really interested in this. And she's talked to us a bit about what the school does. And, you know, it's a personal favor. The other thing, you could use SurveyMonkey, you know, just, you don't have to have it as an in-person, especially these days, with COVID still very much a concern for many communities. You could do it on Zoom. And then you follow up with a gift card, an Amazon gift card afterwards. So it, you know, you have to be a bit entrepreneurial as far as your approach to this.
Okay. We did have a question come in through chat. As community colleges, our population changes every 2 years, quite different than the public library communities. Any suggestions on how to approach this constantly changing group?
That is a huge challenge. And I would say that that would probably be akin to, you know, any academic library. You've got this new group. I live in a community where community college exists as well as a major university. So there is it's a very transient community within a a community that has some staying power. I would think you're going to have to assume that you have to start over every 2 years. In some fashion or form, refining based on what you learned from the past 2 years. I would say as there may be an opportunity with alumni, especially if there is a foundation and you're finding that there's some development work around alumni, that you see what you can do to be in touch with them to find out what would being more aware of library services, would that have helped them? What did they use for library services? Find out where the gaps are. We have a lot of folks in Orange County who the hours of the community college library don't necessarily sync with their study availability. So they use the public library an awful lot. And that would have been something I would have loved to have explored a little bit more, is that partnership between public and community college and how you can bridge those gaps or address those gaps in services for the students, especially the not what you would consider in other areas, the non-traditional student.
Okay, there's one more comment, but then our time is about up here. So Sue again from Moraine Valley said that their college doesn't allow for gift cards, but pizza works great to get students to attend. So it just really depends a lot on your
funding sources.
And your clientele
we
and
have
things
a
like that.
friends group. The Orange County Public Library has a friends group. So our gift cards would have to have come from there as well, because the county shut down gift cards too. So pizza, snacks, lemonade,
anything. So okay, well, it is 10:57, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you, Libbie, for a very informative presentation. We really appreciate you. The Professional Development Committee appreciates this. I have 2 quick announcements. Number 1, Ashton Trimble, who is the board chair for No Rock, sent out an email last week, and she asked for a call for volunteers specifically for a couple different committees, but there is a marketing task force being formed. So those of you who are attending here today, you seem like you might be a natural volunteer group for this marketing task force. When we send out the recording, we will send out some information about that and some who to contact for about that. And then the other question will be, and matter of fact, Ashton just appeared in the waiting room. So yeah, so that is there is the call for the marketing task force if anybody is interested in being part of that. And then the next webinar is tentatively set for October 18th. That's a tentative. Be on the lookout for an email, and the tentative topic for that is getting published. So there will be more information coming on that in the next few weeks. But so mark down October 18th as a tentative for that. So again, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Libbie, for presenting, and everybody else have a great day. So thank you. Bye, everybody.